Rightio. So, seeing Brandon doing his abridged version of Harry Potter made me think, how about I abridge a book that I loved when I was a kid? Now, this is a book series called Deadly. It's written by Maurice Gleitzman and Paul Jennings, and it's deadly as in the lethal sense, not as in the Aboriginal term which basically means cool, or good, really good. So Deadly is a really strange book series. I can't remember exactly what it was about, but I think it involved some weird stuff with immortality or magic tea or something like that. Actually, I'll quickly read what the blurb says, so that will probably give you a good idea. Reptile spun the wheel and expertly changed gear. We screeched round a corner. I was flung back against the seat. Desperately I hung on to the howling baby. When your father finds out what you've done, I yelled at the blonde boy, you're in for it. I stared at him, trying to take it in. I was being kidnapped at high speed in a military vehicle by a bunch of little brats. So that's a pretty strange little blurb, and I gotta say the first chapter isn't much less strange. Yeah. And it's all a fairly short book. Like the first book, it's like, how thin are you? You'd be lucky to be a centimetre thick, so like maybe, I don't know, 75 mil or something like that. But anyway, the first chapter is called Sprocket 1. I will read this directly just because it's such a strange first words for a chapter. Great structure. I'm not robot. I'm human. Yay, talking. There were three things for sure. I was naked. I didn't know who I was. And I needed to go to the loo. Yeah, that's a pretty unusual way to open your book. It does actually get explained down the track. Although, speaking of which, it starts off with Sprocket basically saying that, and this is all in the first person by the way, that he's making his way down a hillside track. He's just cutting his feet on stones, and he's just doing everything he can to find the spot to take a dump. He squats behind a tree because there's no toilet, there's no paper, but when you need a crap, you need a crap. Ah, I said, that's better. Yeah, he of course wipes his ass with some leaves and puts some dirt over the poo because you gotta bury your poo, okay? You may be in the middle of bumfuck Egypt, but you have to bury your poo. We're not animals. In fact, cats bury their poo, and dogs sometimes kind of bury the poo. So, yeah, that expression doesn't really work, does it? Either way, if you can't flush your poo, bury your poo. Although obviously that kind of is different for boats. But I digress. Drop that, snapped a voice behind him. He turns around and he sees a boy about 6 years old with a pretty face and curly blonde hair. Ooh, sounds like a little Joffrey. He's dressed like a jungle fighter, and not like the dress-up style thing, but like just proper real thing. Just miniature. Sprocket drops a clod of dirt from his hand because he hasn't finished burying his poo yet. He asks where the kid's from. Where's your mummy? And yeah, he's wondering if there could be some kind of mutual assistance. Sprocket just reflects on how he'd woken up at the dawn and he was completely naked, lying on some grass, and that's the only thing he knew. The kid ignores him. In one hand he's got a small spoon, the other a mobile phone. He flicks the phone open, and yes, he flicks the phone open. It was written that long ago. When was this written? There's a website, so it's not that long ago. Well, it talks about the Wicked series being the bestseller of 1998, so this was probably written around the turn of the century. Yeah, I'm going to say turn of the century. Oh wait, you'll say it at the start of the book. First published by Penguin Books 2000. So this book is 17 years old. Okay, so the little kid shouts he's here into the phone about half a k along the track. He glances up at the half-covered poo and says, he's done a nice big one. Jesus Christ. So, yeah, this little blonde kid dressed in military garb has hunted this naked guy who's just taken shit, and he's after this naked guy's shit. So, yeah, this is an Australian children's book, and I was probably 8 or 9 when I first started reading this series. Of course, 17 years ago, phone reception wasn't that good, so the kid starts getting pissed off because the phone's playing up. He's got poor signal, and of course he's trying to find good reception. And like any kid would do, he throws the phone on the ground and jumps on it, screaming pathetic, cheap rubbish. Now Sprocket does the logical thing and calls the little kid Titch and tells him to settle down, your mummy can't be far away. He says he tries to sound relaxed, but he was worried, so it certainly doesn't help. As a promising sign for every naked man who's just taken a monster dump, the angelic little boy had a devilish smile. That sounds like the kid's either going to kick him in the nuts or bite his nuts off. For some reason, the little kid isn't surprised that Sprocket is naked, and he seems to know who he is. He just tells him to stay there, and that he's not going to get away. Sprocket goes on to talk about how the kid should probably be in kindergarten, or doing finger painting, or something like that, not staying in the middle of a rainforest, ordering him around like a bossy bank manager. Now, by saying rainforest, I'm guessing that this story is set probably up in Queensland, given that if you're naked and you're not freezing your ass off and you're in a rainforest, it basically means you're in Queensland. The only problem is you are in Queensland. So Sprocket begins to wonder if he's his little brother, but he had hard eyes. Maybe I have hard eyes too. Strange writing. And yeah, he posits that he doesn't even know what he looks like, and he actually gets kind of scared. He says that's a terrible feeling. He asks if the little kid knows him, and the little kid says, just take it easy. There's no one around to help you. Think about it. Consider your options. All alone in the bush, naked with no food. Better give yourself up. This is a rough country. You need clothes. And yeah, I can attest to that. In Australia, you do need clothes to get around, because without clothes in Australia, you'll probably get yourself locked up for indecent exposure and that sort of stuff. On to page 4. We are flying along. How many pages is this chapter? It appears to be 10 pages long. Wow, we're nearly halfway there. Mind you, it is the early morning, and Sprocket does mention that he is shivering in the air. And he's embarrassed, go figure. He's saying that the little kid talked funny for a little kid, which, well, most kids talk funny, don't they? The word seems too big for his mouth, and Sprocket starts feeling a bit uneasy, and someone's just trying to fucking ruin this abridging by texting me. I'll have to hunt them down and kill them. Little shits. Anyway, Sprocket starts wondering whether he could take on the little kid, like whether he could fight him or whether the little kid would hurt him. Could he hurt him? He's only half his size. And of course, the little kid reaches into his pocket, takes out a white handkerchief, and says, I think you have something that belongs to me. And can you say where this is going? He was crazy. That's Sprocket's thought about the kid. Sprocket's naked, he has no pockets. What could he possibly have that belonged to someone else? The little kid has dimples in his rosy red cheeks. He grins with delight, drops to his knees, spreads the hanky on the ground, starts scooping up the poo with the handkerchief. He looked at the big brown lump of poo with sparkling eyes, as if it were made of gold. Sprocket understandably says, oh yuck, he's pinching my poop, shoveling up my disgusting. Gross. Surely this was a dream. It must be a nightmare. Sprocket gets weirder than that. Trust me on this. The kid was too confident for his age. His eyes were old. They seemed to know things that they shouldn't. They weren't the eyes of a child. It just doesn't make sense. How could any of this be happening? Sprocket starts thinking, surely I'm going to wake up from this dream at any moment. Surely I'm going to be woken up soon. He tries once more to be friendly to the little kid and asks what's his name. Shut up, he responds, which, if Sprocket was a bit of a dad, he'd say, oh, hello, shut up. I don't know who I am. I've got amnesia. Okay, that kind of ruins the joke. But anyway, Sprocket puts on a false grin, decides that if the little blonde kid doesn't tell him his name, he's just going to call him Pooper Scooper. So congratulations, little blonde kid. You're now called Pooper Scooper. The little kid ignores him, and soon they hear an engine, a very large, unfriendly growl. Someone else is coming. Okay, so the book's just straight up calling his kid Pooper Scooper from now on, or at least until he gets a proper name. He jumps to his feet as a truck rumbles. Well, it's not a truck, the Hummer. The Hummer rocks up. And yeah, you can tell this is old because people still drove Hummers. Those god-awful things. Sprocket half expects to see soldiers, but couldn't see anyone because, of course, the windows are tinted. The driver jumps out and it's a girl. She was a little kid too, about the same age as Pooper Scooper. They look like they're about 5 or 6. And he just can't believe that she was driving a truck. I don't think it's a sexist thing, like saying that, ooh, what's a 6-year-old girl doing driving a truck? I think it's more just how the hell is a 6-year-old kid driving a truck? No, was she sitting on a pillow to see over the steering wheel? She's dressed in red and blue racing car gloves, baseball cap, and a driving jacket fit for a Formula One champion, covered in ads and blah-de-blah-de-blah. One of the things reads reptile. She licked her lips with a flicking tongue, just like a lizard about to catch a fly. So I'm guessing this girl's going to get called reptile. There's someone else inside the Hummer, and they jump out. 2 kids jump out, actually. They're dressed in expensive walking gear. Wow, they're covered in Nike boots and designer jeans. One's got a beanie on, the other has spiky red hair and scowled a lot. Okay, so 17 years ago, having spiky red hair and scowling was actually fashionable. It's going to be hard to believe, but yeah. Just look at any Prodigy film clip. That gives you a pretty good idea of what fashion used to be like back in the 90s. So they're covered in backpacks with the aluminium frame, so they're hardcore stuff. Ropes, knives, whistles, etc., etc. They all have mobile phones, which I cannot stress that 17 years ago, a whole lot of kids having mobile phones is actually a really bizarre thing. Like today, a little kid having a phone, that's not that odd. But 17 years ago, little kids having mobile phones was really bizarre. Yeah, so Sprocket's just standing there, stark naked, gaping at the crazy sight, because, well, what else can he do? He's stark naked. His skin's beginning to crawl, alarm bells are ringing in his brain. All of a sudden, he feels like prey. Time to go, he says to himself, but it's too late. The Scowler has a net, and he's thrown it over him. Yeah, now rope's been tied around his ankles, and yeah, Sprocket has just been covered in rope and nets, and he's just been a weird, trapped, naked man. I know I say man, but realistically, he's probably like a teenager or something like that. So the kid in the beanie is wondering where something is, because, of course, who doesn't like to play the pronoun game? The pronoun game is so fun. It's where you use vague terms like it or that or something, and you don't actually explain it, so you can keep the audience in suspense. But in reality, it's just really bloody annoying. Pooper Scooper says it's in the hanky. You're all getting really excited about Sprocket's poo. Yeah, because, yeah. The kid in the beanie is so worked up that he's beginning to jab it with his bare fingers. Reptile, she's a bit smarter, she's using her gloved hand to do it. Scowler is just slicing into sections with his Bowie knife. What do you Americans call a Bowie? Because we've got we had David Bowie, I always say it as Bowie, even if it is Bowie for you Americans, but it's my book. It's my abridging, so complain in the comments. Let's see, he's nearly cutting the Beanie Kid's fingers, so of course that's not very good. You don't want to cut fingers with the knife covered in poo. I mean, the E. coli and the salmonella and all sorts of, well, not just shit, is in the expression, but all sorts of bacteria, like, yeah, you'd get a nasty infection, and given they're in a tropical area, like if they don't wash it out and get some like band-aids or Dettol onto it, they could lose a finger or even a hand, which is not good. Pooper Scooper reasserts dominance, saying that he's in charge. He shoves the others aside, recommences investigating my poop with his spoon. Because in Australia, you've all played Knifey Spoony before, haven't you? Like, we all know that the biggest knife is actually a spoon. Ooh, someone has a name. Awesome. I believe it's Pooper Scooper, and they're worried about damaging something in the poo. So, and they're saying it's their last chance. So clearly Sprocket's either eaten something, or, like most teenagers. He's probably shoved some drugs up his ass. Yeah, they're just worried about losing the last bit of MDMA or something like that. Now, in true Eki smashing fuckhead fashion, Sprocket starts wriggling around inside his net like those dickheads you see at the clubs, just except in a net and naked. Well, just in a net, I should say. Yeah, just don't worry about that then. He's trying to get away, and the more he struggles, the more tangled he gets because, go figure, he's wrapped up in a net. Hooper Scooper is very angry. He's shrieking, it's not there. And now they turn their attention to Sprocket. Scowler wipes his knife on the grass and joins the others as they form a circle around him. This certainly sounds foreboding. Yes, each one of them had a murderous expression on their face. Sprocket looks for mercy, but the only one with any sign of doubt is Beanie. Behind his angry looks, his eyes were not as hard as the others. There's a lot of description of the kids' eyes and the looks on their faces. Like, Paul Jennings and Morris Gleitzman have gone to a lot of effort to create these characters without actually telling us their names. And we're only up to page 8, so already you feel like you know a fair bit about each of these characters. For those who aren't good on maths, Sprocket mentions that the little kids outnumber him 4-1, which, last I checked, isn't terribly good odds. It's like the chances of having sex with someone in Game of Thrones and them being related to you. Like, it's not a good chance of you not fucking a relative. I've lost my place. Where was I? Oh yes, so Sprocket thinks that, okay, there's 4 of them, there's 1 of me, but I'm twice as big, so I should be able to get out, well, if he gets out of the net. He starts bucking up and down and squirming and wriggling like a wild boar. Beanie's worried that he's panicking, that he might hurt himself, and Scowler, completely sincerely and not at all sarcastically, says, "We wouldn't want that." That was, of course, insincere and sarcastic. Both what Scowler says and what I said before that. He jumps into the air and gives Sprocket a swift kick in the neck with the sole of his boot. That sounds like it would fucking hurt a lot. Oh god, being kicked in the neck. Especially with a boot, like a proper hiking boot or military boot. Surprised it doesn't knock him out. Although he does collapse from the pain, start choking, which does concern Reptile. He points out that they need him alive. Pooper Scooper says, for now, so obviously really not looking good for Sprocket. And Reptile is quite concerned that if they damage Sprocket, that they're going to ruin whatever it is they're after, because he's our last chance. Beanie thinks that Sprocket's died. Pooper Scooper picks up Sprocket's wrist to feel for a pulse. No, he's not. He's just faking. It's a bit like that parrot scene from Monty Python. He's just fainted. What a weakling. Oh, he's not dead. He's just resting. So they undo the ropes and taking him to a patch of soft grass, hopefully poo-free. Reptile forces some water between his lips, like from a flask, not like some weird other mentality. Not mentality, other way. Sprocket wakes up. Here we have an interesting description of what Scowler looks like. Scowler fixed me with an angry glare. His red spikes of hair whipped around like snakes as he angrily shook his head. "Where is it?" he said. "Hand it over, nothing more will happen to you." I don't know why he sounds like Batman. It's just like, "Where is it?" And I know that's a terrible Batman impersonation, but you know the scene from the movie. If you don't, well, you've missed out because that's a good movie. And of course, Sprocket doesn't like playing the pronoun game, so he asks, "Where's what?" Scowler says, "Don't try that. You know exactly what we want." He looked ready to spring into the air. So of course, Sprocket's trying to defend himself. He's saying, "I don't know what you're after. I don't even know who I am." Pooper Scooper very sarcastically says, "Oh, very good. Fantastic. Wonder-fucking-full." I may have ad-libbed a certain line. Yep, they're talking about taking him back with them. Sprocket goes cold all over. He's worried about being tortured. So, of course, he shrieks preemptively. It actually spooks the kids, just for a moment. But Sprocket uses that opportunity to jump to his feet. Fish? The fuck's fish? Like something between the German word for flesh and fish? Flesh fish? On your feet? Ugh. But anyway, Sprocket uses that distraction to jump between Pooper Scooper and Scowler. Because he's bigger than them, he's got longer legs, he's able to run. And he bolts down the track out like a rat out of a trap, running down a track covered in gravel in bare feet. Not a good idea. Pretty damn painful. Speaking from experience, also from what it says in the book. Yes, he calls them fiendish little terrorists, and he doesn't want to be their prisoner, which is understandable. I mean, they're poo jabbers. I don't mean that is a homophobic slur. Yeah, like that's just literally what they are. They're literal poo jabbers. Jesus Christ. Sprocket decides to jump into the undergrowth, which again, given that's Queensland, that could be quite dangerous because there's a bush called the Gympie Gympie plant, which is like seriously painful. Like, I'd recommend you look up Gympie Gympie. I think it's Gympi, and just write that twice. Yeah, it's meant to be seriously fucking nasty. As he's running through the undergrowth, he hears yelling and shrieking and crashing through the forest, coming after him were the brats from hell. So that's the end of the first chapter of the first book of the Deadly series. The next chapter is from another person's perspective called Amy. Now, obviously I'll say that for another time. So it's a weird book. It's obviously full of mystery and intrigue, and it's clearly meant to entertain kids, but at the same time it sounds like it just entertain, well, it is entertaining for just about everyone. I hope you enjoyed me attempting to do this, and I hope I've not been too monotonous or droning. See you all for chapter 2, if I do a chapter 2. Cheers.